Great sewers are also great planners. Take your handy dandy notebook to plan. Hi family, and welcome to My Main Stitches. I'm Jeannie J. This channel is to help my adult daughters. If they ever circle back to sewing, I want to be the one helping them learn how to sew. So this channel is dedicated to beginner sewers, and if you're here, you're family. So today's video, I want to talk to you about planning. Like, good sewers are really good at reading the guide sheet and very detail oriented in terms of doing the work. But great sewers are also great planners. We do our planning on the background or before we start our project because we want to be able to sew in the flow. Let's face it, most of us are sewing for fun, not for necessity. So we want this to be very pleasant and smooth as we're going through the process. So today for planning, we're going to be talking about staging, and then visualization and using your imagination for sewing. And lastly, samples, an often overlooked part that's really important before you do your actual project is taking some samples to your machine and setting up your machines to sew. So let's go. In terms of staging, my battery is low. I always lay out my pattern pieces, and today for our video purposes, I already have everything cut out. I've done other videos on how to get things cut out well, and you can reference those. But to get started, I lay out everything on my cutting table in order of appearance on the guide sheet if possible. I keep my guide sheet conveniently on the wall so I can reference it for both cutting out and for sewing. And the thing I like about these patterns from Mimi G, oh my goodness, she always has a video that accompanies the pattern. And let me tell you what, when you're a beginner sewer, even if you are, intermediate, it is so helpful to see a video, a visual aid, if you will, of the steps. The guide sheet sometimes for the trickier things like, say, inserting a hidden zipper, it can be a little difficult to really understand, but if you've got a video, it's right there and you can have every bit of confidence at the machine that you're doing it correctly. So I love that about her. So I lay everything out here. I take my notcher and I go ahead and make all my notches everywhere you see the little darts on the edge of your pattern pieces. And then for the dots, like for example, if you're making a dart on your, like for this on the front of your vest, I have my markers set out for those. Now for marking your fabric, for darker like cottony type kind of fabrics, I use my white chalk pencil. It's really great for that, and any kind of chalk really, and it wipes right off of your fabric and doesn't leave a mark. But for the other fabrics, I use a marker that is a washable marker. And I don't actually mark those dots until right before I sew, because the fabric, depending on what kind of fabric you're using, will absorb that and you won't be able to know that you're doing your darts correctly. That's not great. All right, so I have everything laid out in order of appearance. Oh, I like my terms for acting. Are you picking up on that? We have staging and we have order of appearance on the guide sheet. But anyway, so I lay everything out. I've got my guide sheet and I've got my video. And the next stage for, the next part for staging is going to be setting up things where you're starting to visualize the project. So let's go to the next step. Okay, everyone, so next steps for staging, we start to move into visualization and engaging our imagination for sewing. The first thing I like to do for each project is to pick up a handy dandy planning project planner, and I use, the dollar store or just anywhere convenient for you, and pick up a little cute little notebook. And inevitably with each pattern, I am making adjustments to fit my body, or embellishments that I want to incorporate for, decorative embellishments on the pattern. So I'll write down everything that's in my head in terms of imagining the project. Then everything that I can do, I will go ahead and put that into the steps that go according with the guide sheet. And then the other thing I do is lay out my sample fabrics with threads. For me, I'm using my serger for overcasting, but I have a really great serger that will overcast and make a seam for you at the same time. It's called the 5-thread safety stitch. And for that particular stitch, I know I'll be doing that with 2 different sets of fabrics. One for the lining, and I'll have those 5 threads laid out. And I love to have a highlighter thread just somewhere in every one of my projects. You really won't see it for the lining until you flip it out and look at it, which I probably will because I love it. But I lay all of that out by the fabric so I can see how that's kind of going to look. And then the other fabrics, I know I'll mostly be using this nice fancy top fabric as the main fabric, and then the pieces that complement that and kind of go along, strips that go along the side and in the back, is kind of a blue jean denim that really is about the same weight as of that fabric and works really well as a complement. So when I do the serging for this set, I'll use the blues and grays, the gray that will go along the side of this one, and then the blues that will go along the side of this one. And so that works really well. Now, the other thing that I love to mention, and this is the third part of our video, and it's moving from visualization into samples and setting up those samples on your machine so you get an idea of what it's going to look like. This is an often overlooked step for beginner sewers, but it's really important in terms of smooth flow of when you're actually sewing your project. So for me, this includes one other embellishment because, and let me go to the other side here so that you can see what I'm talking about. On this pattern, she has a complementary strip inside both front pieces. And I'm going to use the blue for that. And then the main fabric pieces will be using this really fancy, I don't even know what this fabric is, but it's awesome. So I'm going to take this blue and the other fabric, and I know that I'll have some cording in between. Again, I know that I can put one straight line of cording in there and it'll really make this vest pop. So I'm going to put that cording between the blue and the fancy fabric, but I'll have an opportunity to top stitch along the blue, but I don't know which color thread I'll use for that top stitch yet. But between the cording and the top stitch, I know it's going to look like a really finished, well-made project. But I don't know which thread I'll use for that one strip of top stitch that will go just next to the cording. So I'm going to just set my machines up and sew a few stitches of each color in between, so I can do that seam and then set those colors in there and I can have an idea of what it looks like. Taking your samples to your machine gives you 2 things that you're taking care of. First, you're taking care of making adjustments in your machine if you need to for the fabrics you're using. You may need to change the needles, you may need to adjust the presser foot or use a different presser foot. All those kinds of things you get set up with your samples before you start your project. And then the other thing is allowing us to kind of seal in the visualization. You'll be able to choose by sight and seeing the finished item which one of those threads will look the best as a top stitch. And based on that look, then I'll decide which button. I'm going to put a button on the top of the vest, and I can decide by which thread I choose, if I'm going to use this red button, which is cool, or this black button. Both of them look, if I can get that up, both of those look really nice with this project, and we'll add a nice embellishment on the top. And then last thing, anytime you're doing an embellishment, you want to make sure before you start you have enough to do the project. So I measured out this cording. And the other thing is interfacing for these inside strips. I love this woven fusible interfacing. It is my favorite go-to for any time I need interfacing in a project, that, for anything that's lightweight especially, but it just works so well. And so, yeah, I finally got smart enough and took my mom's suggestion and got that in bulk. So that's what's up. Okay, everyone, to wrap it up with just a few final thoughts. Take your handy dandy notebook to plan each project, and after you have everything staged well, go ahead and take those things and put them by your machines. For me, obviously, I got to clean off my ironing station so I can use that to press out my seams, but also you want to keep those things close to the machines where you're going to use them so that we can do what? Sew in the flow. That's what it's all about. Planning well helps us to be in the flow of the project. And really, that's what we want to do in life too. We want to plan well so we can show up and play well. Take care, everybody. Thanks for listening.